Hello and welcome to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast number 82. Yes, I know, slightly late again, but unfortunately I spent most of Sunday in bed just getting over the end of this cold, which as you can probably hear I'm still just about trying to do. However, on with the show. This week, as well as our review of Mummy on the Orient Express, I'll be taking a close-up look at new series director Joe Ahearne, whose Doctor Who credits include Bad Wolf, Boomtown, Dalek, Father's Day and The Parting of the Ways.
There were many trains to take the name Orient Express, but only one in space.
Good morning, everyone. Your goal is to ascertain the foretold's true nature.
I know exactly what this sounds like.
Isn't this exciting?
It's immortal, unstoppable, unkillable.
Can we get a new expert?
Those that bear the foretold stare have 66 seconds to live.
Stop the clock.
Come here, you scrumptious little beauty.
A box?
Doctor, what is it?
I've got mail.
First to feed back on Mummy on the Orient Express was Jade Linnett, who said, "Very good, though I've always been an Agatha Christie fan, so when I saw the preview I was really excited. I wish we had a bit longer than 66 seconds to have the explanation for the mummy, as that made the explanation a bit incomprehensible on first watch. Also the soldier bit keeps coming up, but as a theme it's weird because it doesn't really quite require a resolution, it just is." Andrew Marmot was next, saying, "Ah, nice, a change of pace and a return to the monster of the week. Very enjoyable from end to end. This is turning into one of the strongest seasons since the series has returned." Thanks for that, Andrew, and I have to admit I'm fast coming to the same conclusion. Next up was Barry Ricks, who said, "I expected it to be a naff episode, but it turned out to be very good, 8 out of 10. Nate Lindsell was next to share his thoughts, saying simply, 10 out of 10, forgotten about last week's already. High praise indeed, Nate, given that last week's Kill the Moon was as good as it was. Ian Thomas McLean said, "I really don't know what to say. Once again, really good. I like the twists and turns of it, and it was a proper murder mystery. I like the idea of the mummy. I'm sure many people will use the mummy soldier idea in their Pyramids of Mars headcanon. I love the Tom Baker vibe that Capaldi had too. Probably my favourite episode of the series. Next week's Flatline looks really good, and once again seeing the trailer made it turn from a dull episode into an amazing one." New to feedback, Rowan Van Slooten, and I hope that's right, Rowan, said, "I loved it, especially after last week's rubbish." Rowan, mate, don't be standing on the fence like that. If you thought Kill the Moon wasn't all that good and could have been improved slightly, you just go ahead and say it. Seriously though, as I've said before on the show, I love that we all have differing opinions about the show we love so much. That's what makes fandom so much fun to be a part of, and we're all equally entitled to our varying opinions. Speaking of which, a quick side slide to the lovely ladies from the Sonic Toolbox podcast to say I loved your show this week, as in fairness I do every week, and I'd love to hear you explain your differing thoughts on the feedback I sent in last week on Kill the Moon. Keep up the brilliant show, ladies. Next up was Regina Van Jink, and again I hope I've said that right. She said, I loved it. The Are You My Mummy thing, the jelly babies, the salute at the end. Best episode of the season. Lastly in this week's feedback was Michael Doyle, who said, I liked it. I've really liked the episodes this season. I don't care what anyone says. The writing, directing, action, acting, production quality, they're all superb. Interesting here, though, that the Doctor felt bad for the soldier. Thanks for all your feedback, and do please keep it coming. Later in the show I'll be sharing my thoughts about the episode, but for now, let's take a look at Series 1 director, Joe Ahearne.
Very good. Quite the expert. I don't need to make claims, I know how good I am.
Joe Ahearne is a British television writer and director, best known for his work on several fantasy and science fiction based programmes, including Ultraviolet, Apparitions and Doctor Who. Ahearne's career began when the short film Latin for a Darkroom won an award at the Edinburgh Festival in 1994, and shortly afterwards he began working for the independent television company World Productions. Among his work for World were episodes of the 1997 series the BBC Two drama This Life, for which Ahearne wrote 2 and directed another 3 episodes, making him the only person to both write and direct episodes for the series. His next major production for World was the 6-episode Channel 4 vampire series Ultraviolet, which Ahearne both wrote and directed. Ultraviolet was broadcast in 1998 to high critical acclaim, and has subsequently been released on both VHS and DVD. The series also ran on the Sci-Fi channel in the United States, and the Fox network in that country produced a pilot for their own version in 2001, although that didn't lead to a series. In 2002, Ahearne directed the pilot for the Big Bear Productions horror fantasy drama Strange, written by Andrew Marshall and broadcast on BBC One. The pilot was successful enough for a series to be commissioned the following year, with Ahearne helming 3 of the 6 episodes, although the series wasn't a success and a second series didn't follow. Ahearne both wrote and directed the 2-part docudrama series Space Odyssey, Voyage to the Planets for the BBC and the Discovery Channel in 2004. He was the director of 5 episodes of the 2005 series of the BBC's Doctor Who, for which Ahearne was nominated for his first BAFTA. In December 2006, his drama Perfect Parents, starring Doctor Who lead Christopher Eccleston, was aired on ITV. The following month, Ahearne returned to This Life to direct a one-off reunion episode, This Life Plus 10, shown on BBC Two on the 2nd of January 2007. Ahearne will also work on Da Vinci's Demons, a fictional adventure TV series created by David S. Goyer for Starz and BBC Worldwide. Ahearne's project Apparitions, a supernatural series for the BBC which he wrote and directed, began on BBC One in November 2008. He also wrote the 4-issue Fantastic Force miniseries for Marvel Comics in 2009, and the Fantastic Four Annual 32 in 2010.
Let me tell you something, Van Statten. Mankind goes into space to explore, to be part of something greater. It's the ultimate in racial cleansing, and you, Van Statten, you've let it loose!
And now it's time for Theta's Thought. Theta's Thought. Theta's Thought. Theta's Thought. Theta's. This week's opening sequence, while not quite as engaging as that of Kill the Moon, and somewhat predictable, did however throw up a good twist, enough for me to want to follow through with the rest of the episode. The whole invisible thing, where the mummy can only be seen by those it's about to kill, was something I hadn't expected, and made me look forward to the rest of the story with intrigue and interest. The first thing to hit me when the story began in earnest was that Jenna Coleman looked absolutely stunning. In far and away the best costume she's worn so far this series, she looked incredible as Clara, and she fitted right in. The second thing, however, was, what's she doing with the Doctor? Surely at the end of last week's episode she'd walked out on him, at the same time telling him to get lost. For a short while it seemed as though we weren't going to get an explanation, but of course it did eventually come in the form of the conversation that the two of them had sat at the table, whilst enjoying the view of the Magellan Black Hole. One of the first things we see and hear as our two leads enter the carriage is of course Fox's. Now I'll openly admit that when I heard she was going to be in the show, I was terrified as to the role she'd be playing, and would this simply be a modern era piece of JNT stunt casting? If you're not sure what J&T stands for, think showrunner in the 1980s. However, in fairness to Foxes, her singing was not only beautiful, but completely unobtrusive, and I thought she was expertly understated. I love the fact that despite the evidence to the contrary, the Doctor's most famous trait, his curiosity, is once again what leads him into the adventure. The scene where he's laying on his bed trying to work through the odds on this being a thing against the odds of it not being a thing had me laughing out loud. I could just picture the Fourth Doctor doing exactly that, which is somewhat ironic given that Capaldi offers Professor Morehouse a jelly baby later on in the episode. Frank Skinner's Perkins was a stroke of genius. Again, when I heard that Frank Skinner was taking a role in the show, I was concerned as to what this role would be. For those of you out there that don't know, Skinner is a well-known comedian in the UK and isn't particularly well known for his acting. So in my head at least I was preparing for something of a court jester type character, such as we got with Malcolm as played by Lee Evans in Planet of the Dead some years back. However, to his absolute credit, Skinner played Perkins absolutely straight, and as a result made the character completely credible to the plot and complementary to the rest of the cast. I've heard numerous suggestions on just who Gus is, and many have said that he or it will be back later in the series. Some have surmised that because he's studying the death of the victims, he is in some way linked to Missy and the Nethersphere. But I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that I think Gus is the Master. Now, why do I say that? Well, no hard and fast evidence other than the suave manner of his talking, coupled with his utter cynicism relating to life and the sanctity thereof. Do I think we'll hear from Gus again? Yes. But I think he will at some point in the future reveal himself to be the Master. Some have said that the resolution to the mummy problem was more than a little rushed, but I'm not sure that I agree. Look at the facts. A very fast-talking Doctor, and only 66 seconds to work it all out. So yes, it was all worked out in a rush, but it wasn't rushed in terms of the script writing. What was rushed and completely out of character, however, was Clara's change of heart. From last week shouting at the Doctor to get lost and then walking out of the TARDIS, to this week putting all that down to a wobble? I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. Firstly, would anyone who had done what Clara did at the end of Kill the Moon then go back for one last hurrah? I think not. And secondly, despite a throwaway line about the number of weeks that have supposedly passed between Kill the Moon and Mummy on the Orient Express, the bile that Clara felt when she left the TARDIS was that strong that one last hurrah just didn't fit it. Add to that the anger she expressed when she found out that the Doctor had lied to her about what was happening on the Orient Express, and her change of heart simply doesn't add up. For all my comments on believable fiction last week, the characters therein still have to have an element of consistency to them, and here Clara's character lacked that completely. Despite all that, however, this was still a really good episode for me, and one that comfortably bears repeated watching, so for me, a strong 8 out of 10.
Oh, goodbye, my dear chap. I must say I've had the time of my lives.
And that's all for this week. As always, thanks for tuning in, and if you have any thoughts on this week's show or on Doctor Who in general, I'd love to hear from you at respectthething@hotmail.com or on Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast on Facebook. Next week we'll be closing our look at Doctor Who showrunners and directors past and present, for the time being at least, with a look at perhaps one of the most prolific of all Doctor Who directors, Graham Harper. And of course, we'll be reviewing Flatline.
Oh, that can't be good. Something nearby is leeching all the external dimensions.
Aliens.
Possibly. Oh, what am I kidding? Probably. Whatever they are experimenting. They're testing. They are dissecting. Trying to understand us. Trying to understand 3 dimensions. Life support failing.
Thank you for listening to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all copyright and property of the BBC, and no infringement is intended.